I wrote my first feature-length screenplay in 2 weeks, the first week to come up with the idea, and the second week to finish a draft. And if you stick around to the end of this video, I'll show you how I did it. Hi, my name is Brian Albert, and I've been writing for pretty much my entire life. Some of my earliest moments include me dictating to my mom as she typed onto the computer of all the random stories that were in my head. And I do this at least once or twice a week. I go up to my mom and pester her, saying, please, can you type for me these new ideas that I have? And she'd go, okay, and take time out of her busy day, go to the family computer, and listen to me ramble on about adventures I wanted to go on with my friends, or ideas that I had for SpongeBob episodes. Every now and then I'll find one of these stories, open one up, and read them, and just laugh at how utterly ridiculous and stupid they are, but also be kind of impressed by how creative they were, and how much this kid just liked to tell stories. Or he just liked to talk a lot, which is something that he never really grew out of. But with age came growth, and I eventually learned how to type for myself and was finally free to write whatever story I wanted to tell. I wrote books for my county's writing festival, I wrote movies that I always intended on making and never did, and most likely never will. But I also had the great fortune of growing up as the internet was taking shape. There was this thing called Google and this website called YouTube where you could post 360p videos and watch videos of flying cats and dancing badgers and scary, terrifying CGI dancing babies. All of a sudden, I was gifted with so many resources and sources of information. I could learn VFX by watching Corridor Digital or Freddy W, or I could learn to animate by watching Egoraptor or Rubber Ninja. I was learning to tell stories in ways that I didn't think were possible. Empowered and excited by all this new information, I wrote even more. I wrote movies that I would film with my friends and then edit on Windows Movie Maker and then burn them onto DVDs so that I can pass them out to my family. I even made them pay for it. Like, I was also a businessman. Like, and they weren't cheap. They were like $5, okay? They were paying $5 for some crappy Call of Duty ripoff video. But nonetheless, I was churning out story after story and movie after movie, invigorated by the stuff that I would find online. And the new content didn't stop coming out. Soon I was learning about story structure and character arcs and exposition. I learned more about story theory and read film reviews and read filmmaking books. Filmmaking started becoming more technical, and my way of thinking about filmmaking became more of what middle school me called more sophisticated, but what now me calls pretentious. But nonetheless, my horizons were growing and my technical knowledge was too. Then middle school ended and high school was fast approaching and the movies stopped coming out as quickly. I was writing fewer screenplays, I was filming fewer movies, fewer projects were being finished, and even fewer were being started. So by the time I got to high school, I had no ongoing projects. I had run out of steam. But then I was approached by a friend to write a musical. I had never written a musical before. I liked writing music, and I liked telling stories, so I just figured, you know, I haven't had a major project in a year or two, might as well do it. The first draft of that script didn't get finished for 3 years. And that's not because I procrastinated or anything. The story was basically on the forefront of my mind 24/7. If I wasn't paying attention in class, I was probably thinking about this story. Or playing Minecraft. There was a lot of playing Minecraft and Flappy Golf. There was a lot of Flappy Golf. Oh, and Duck Life. There was a lot of playing Duck Life instead of paying attention in class. The point is, I was thinking about the story a lot. I'd be churning ideas in my head all day long, and then I'd come home and plunk out a few notes on the piano, or record a short demo of a song, or write a little bit of a scene. But every time I actually sat down and started to write the script itself, nothing came out. I type a little something and go, no, that's not gonna work. So I delete it. And then I type a little bit more, and then, no, that's not gonna work either. Then I delete that. And I couldn't help but ask myself, what happened to that little kid who could just ramble on about anything for hours? Where did he go? To answer those questions, I went to where that overhyper little kid went whenever he got stuck. The internet. I read more about writer's block and how to fit your ideas into an outline. I learned all sorts of sayings and axioms and all kinds of quick fixes that made me feel like that I was learning something. But I wasn't. I still couldn't bring myself to write more than 10 pages a week if I was able to write something that week. It's been a couple years since I finished that first draft, and I haven't really touched it or looked at it since. That was my last major project. Until recently. A couple weeks ago, I got sick. Not COVID or anything, but I didn't want to risk the weakening immune system of my family, and I didn't want to go through all the complications with that, so I just stayed in my room for like 5 days, and that was fun. And during that week that I spent alone in my room, I started getting a little stir-crazy. I started thinking about all the things that had been happening in my life as of late, and started really exploring the emotional weight that I had been carrying throughout this absolute hellscape of a year. And I really needed a place to just dump it all. So I took out my sketchbook and started brain dumping all over the page. I put words and feelings and recent experiences, all of which were jumbled and messy and completely incoherent. But by the end of it, I realized that there was a story there, and not just a story that I wanted to tell, but a story that I really needed to tell. This script would just be me letting all of this crap out of my brain onto the page. So I started outlining. I got a main character and I had 2 side characters that I was happy with. I had a setup and I had an ending, but I didn't really have much of a middle. I spent a lot of time just sort of staring at the outline, thinking about what could happen, but nothing came out. So of course, as always, I went to the internet. I looked up videos about exposition and plot structure and scene structure, and I just sort of absorbed all of this information on how to fill out the second act and how to create a very interesting character arc, and I felt like that all of this information was helping, but it wasn't. I still got stuck in the outline, and once again, all I could help was ask, where was that little kid? Where did he go? But then I remembered something. As I learned more about story theory, I started writing less. Over time, I had become lost in the technicalities of what was the right way to write something. Before I knew anything about stuff about structure and exposition and all that stuff, I was just a kid who wrote what he thought was cool. He let his mind just take an idea and run with it, without regard for whether or not it made sense, or without thinking too much about it, and most importantly, without judging it. He didn't care if his stories were messy or dumb or didn't make any sense at all. He just wanted to put something down on paper because he wanted to. So I figured that if I wanted to get this screenplay done, if I wanted to see this final draft through, I had to learn to embrace this mindset. I had to go into this screenplay knowing that it was going to suck. And that's what I did. That following week, I just sat down in front of the computer, looked at my hands, looked at the empty page, and just said to myself, now write words. And surprisingly, that worked. And I did just write words. 10 pages worth. And the next day, another 10 pages, then another. Then I did 20, then I did 30, until at the end of the week, I had written 74 pages of story, which is a short screenplay, but it was a done screenplay. I just barely squeezed out the minimum requirements for a feature-length film. I printed out those pages and I just held them in my hand for the first time and just laughed with utter, unadulterated, genuine joy. This was my first time finishing anything this big, but here it was, in my hands, physically finished. I went to sleep that night so relieved. I felt a sense of pride that after all these years, I had finally written my first feature-length screenplay. And I woke up the next morning nervous because I wasn't quite sure if I was ready to read it from beginning to end for the very first time. I wanted to save it until I gave it to somebody else to read, or maybe give it some time and read it later, but I don't know, anxiety and excitement just got the best of me and I couldn't hold back, so I cracked it open and read it from beginning to end. And yeah, it sucked. It was pretty bad. The pacing was weird, the dialogue was clunky in places, and there was a distinct lack of character and style, but it didn't really hurt to read because I knew that it was probably gonna end up like that. I knew that it was gonna suck, but I had something. I had something to work with. I could now go back in and tweak things and cut things and add stuff and rewrite stuff and slowly shape it into the story that I wanted to tell. Now I could use all that storytelling theory that I had been cramming into my brain for the past few years. And right now I'm currently in the midst of writing my second draft, and then I'm gonna write a third, then a fourth, and then a fifth, or how many it is going to take for me to get to that place where I want to be, where I can tell the story that I just absolutely am yearning to tell. But I wouldn't be at this point if I didn't just sit down and start writing. not caring if it was going to be good or if it was going to be bad. I didn't judge my work before it was done. And I didn't judge myself for being a terrible writer. But don't think I just sat down at my desk and just intentionally wrote crap and ignored all of the basics of storytelling and structure. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that my mindset going into this first draft was one of openness and non-judgment. I had to let go of all of my perfectionist tendencies and just be okay with good enough. On a more practical advice standpoint, I'd also like to add that I had a strategy for going about writing this first draft. The strategy was very simple. It was just the concept of cause and effect. See, I did a lot of improv in high school, and I still do improv to this day, and one of the main rules of improv, which is arguably one of the most famous rules of improv, is yes and. You take the idea that's been suggested to you or put up by your scene partner, and you say yes to it. You accept it, and then you add on to it. That can mean doubling down on the joke or the bit or the game of the scene, or showing the consequence of whatever action that their character takes. But in this case, my scene partner is me. So this dynamic had to happen in my head. My brain would come up with an idea and be all like, what if this happened? Then I'd go, yeah. And then because that happened, maybe this happens. And then my brain goes, wow, that's awesome. And then after that, this happened. My brain is incoherent. This is why it takes so long for me to write things. The opposite of that approach would be, okay, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. I purposefully use the word because in this mindset because it makes the story feel more like a series of connected events that are driven by the actions and decisions of the characters rather than a series of events that just happen. Cause and effect. Decision and then consequence. This mindset, this way of thinking, led me through this absolute failure fest of a writing session and made the crazy incoherence of my mind more coherent. But really, if there's anything that I want you to pick up from this video, if you've been so kind enough to stay this long, then let it be just go out and make something. Write something, film something, create something, and don't keep score. Don't worry about how good it will be or how much it's gonna suck, because you had the courage to actually try. And that within itself is something to be proud of. And if you do make something, if you do have the courage to try and then make something and put it out there, I would love to see it. I genuinely would. I mean, come on, we're in this together. We're all making things and doing things. And if you're just itching to write something or draw something or whatever it may be, join the club. I mean, we don't get anywhere if we don't have other people, other creative people, other people to just support us in our endeavors. So I'd invite you to let this channel be that source of support and community if you so let me. I have a lot of cool friends who like to make cool things, and I'll link to them in the card above and in the doobly-doo down below. We're all just a bunch of dumb broke college kids who are trying to make sense of all of this stuff. And I really hope that you join us. Whether you're a creative person or you don't think you're a creative person, I just hope that you join us. I really do. Now go out and do something. And don't give a damn if it's not your best work. Take care of yourselves. And I'll see you next time.